Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to a special Monday edition of the Watchman Newscast, coming to you from the frozen tundra of the east coast of the United States. We have a major snowstorm bearing down on us right now, but snow or no snow, the Middle East never sleeps. So we wanted to bring you a very important update here today. Four important stories out of the Middle East, the world's most pivotal and chaotic region that you need to know about. So let's get into it. Number one, Anthony Blinken, the brand new U.S. Secretary of State, gave an interview to NBC News yesterday, that's Sunday, January 31st, in which he said that Iran, if it so chooses, could amass the nuclear materials needed to have a nuclear bomb within weeks. Now, before various atomic experts and international diplomats had said in a few months, which is bad enough, Iran could break out and have the bomb if it so chooses. Now the U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, says within weeks. Now he echoes what the Chief of Staff for the Israel Defense Forces, Aviv Kohavi, said just last week, and we talked about it here on the newscast. You can check it out in our archives. Be sure to subscribe while you are there. But Aviv Kohavi said the same exact thing, that Iran could break out within weeks, perhaps, if they so choose. Very, very dangerous situation. Why is this coming forth now? I think there's two kind of opposing strategies, although Aviv Kohavi and Anthony Blinken have come to the same conclusion that Iran could have the bomb within weeks if it so chooses. They are sharing this information and this perspective now, folks, to my mind, for different reasons. For Anthony Blinken, let's start with him, the U.S. Secretary of State. He is saying this as a way to say to the world that, hey, if we don't re-enter the Iran nuclear deal as soon as possible, then Iran could very well get the bomb. So his perspective is, at all costs, we must re-enter the Iran nuclear deal. His boss, Joe Biden, has made very clear that he wants to do just that. And we talked about this on the newscast last week. Again, check it out in our archives. I believe on our Friday newscast, we talked about it. The brand new special envoy for Iran under the Biden administration is a guy by the name of Robert Malley, who is looked at as very pro-Iran and very tough on Israel, a very troubling signal. He was one of the architects of that disastrous Iran nuclear deal. Now he will be the Biden administration's point man to negotiate with Iran. And no doubt, folks, all signs, all indications are that the Biden administration is going to do everything it can to re-enter the United States into that Iran nuclear deal. So Blinken is kind of laying the groundwork in that interview yesterday, saying, wow, Iran is very close to getting the bomb. Hint, hint. This means we really need to re-enter the deal with them so they back off. Well, re-entering the deal is not going to make them back off, maybe in the short term, but long term, they're going to break out eventually. Israel knows that, and that's why Aviv Kohavi, the IDF chief of staff, said last week, hey, it could be weeks. In that same speech, he said that the IDF, under his orders, is drawing up plans to strike Iran's nuclear weapons facilities if needed. And he also cautioned the Biden administration that re-entering that Iran deal would be a major strategic mistake. So Blinken is saying, hey, only a few weeks, world, look out, because he wants the deal to come back to be intact once again. On the other hand, Aviv Kohavi is saying a few weeks, don't sign that deal, because if you sign the deal, it guarantees that they're eventually going to get the bomb. So very interesting that the same message, but competing reasons there between Israel and this brand new Biden administration. That's the number one news item we wanted to share. Number two, also on our Friday newscast. What was Friday? January 29th. We also talked about that Robert Malley appointment during that January 29th newscast. Again, just check it out in our archives. But we talked about the terror attack that day. Thankfully, a failed terror attack against the Israeli embassy in New Delhi, India. A small improvised explosive device exploded. There was a blast outside of the Israeli embassy. Thankfully, no one was hurt. The embassy was not harmed. Some cars around the embassy were damaged by this blast. Right away, we're thinking, okay, who's behind this? Iran obviously has threatened time and time again to seek revenge against Israel for the death of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, their nuclear mastermind, back in November. And as we've told you here on the newscast, one way Iran often chooses to do that is by striking Israeli and Jewish targets around the world. Not in Israel proper, but say an embassy in Argentina or Israeli tourists in Bulgaria. Iran and its proxies like Hezbollah have done this over the decades. There's been a track record. Now, we're finding out some more details about this attempted terror attack on January 29th. Reportedly, a note was left at the scene by a group calling itself Indian Hezbollah. Now, we don't really have many details about any Hezbollah presence in India up until now. According to reports, investigators believe that perhaps this was a group of Indian students who studied in Iran, returned to India, and perhaps the Iranian regime is directing them. Who knows? But Indian authorities are investigating this right now. I'm sure the Israeli Mossad is involved as well in the investigation, at least maybe not up close, but in some capacity dealing with Indian authorities and communicating with them regularly about it. Israeli domestic missions and facilities and embassies around the world are now on high alert. They're always pretty much on high alert, but now even more so after this attempted, what Indian and Israeli authorities are calling attempted terror attack. Now, in that note I mentioned, know also that in the note, it talked about the martyrs, their words, Qasem Soleimani, the terror kingpin who was killed by the United States in a drone strike in January 2020, and the aforementioned Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. They were named in this note, and direct threats in this note by Indian Hezbollah, they're calling themselves, direct threats against the Israeli ambassador to India, Ron Malka, who would be based in that embassy in New Delhi, I believe. So directly naming Soleimani and Fakhrizadeh, directly threatening the Israeli ambassador to India, makes you wonder if the Iranian regime's fingerprints are on this somehow. And again, it was a small IED. Any IED is dangerous, but didn't cause a massive amount of danger. But perhaps this was a sort of probing attack. We'll see. If there's more details to come on that, we will share them with you. Number 3 news item, Israel. This is a short one. Israel is once again testing successfully the Iron Dome missile defense system, this time at sea. The Iron Dome missile defense batteries on a ship at sea, can shoot down rockets, missiles, and drones. And we've talked often here about Iran and its proxies like Hezbollah, like the Houthis in Yemen, using drones as a serious weapon of warfare. So Iron Dome, the IDF at sea, over the past few days, doing some pretty serious tests there once again, and they've been successful, which is good news. Last news item before I get out of here. Once again, we saw airstrikes over the weekend, overnight, Saturday, January 30th, airstrikes in Syria. These are like the 4th or 5th such strikes, folks, in the past month alone. These strikes were once again in eastern Syria, along the Syria-Iraq border, and once again targeting Iranian assets there. No one has claimed responsibility, most likely Israel. Israel has carried out hundreds, if not thousands, of similar strikes throughout Syria against Iranian and Hezbollah targets over the past few years. So we are always keeping an eye on that. It's interesting now, many of these airstrikes were carried out along the Israel-Syria border over the years and in central Syria, around Damascus as well. Now you see more and more, eastern Syria is becoming more of a target where Iran really has a lot of assets along the Syria-Iraq border. Interesting times as always. And one quick, an extra bonus 5th news item to leave you with. Right before I came on, I'm reading that Hezbollah says they shot down an Israeli drone on Lebanon territory. Maybe more on that on tomorrow's newscast. Stay tuned. Subscribe. Thanks so much for being with us. God bless you. We'll see you tomorrow. Until then, never hold your peace.